Hello every gaming buddy, and happy 2019. And yes, you did read the title of this video right. This is the first time I've tried something like this. This is my 2019 recap of every game that I've played so far this year. There's been about 10 games or so I figured it's time to just pause for a moment, reflect on the games that I played, and lend my opinion on each one as I show off the footage that I captured from my streams. And yes, I have streamed every single one of these games. And maybe after I rattle off my impressions of each one, I'll also mention which one was my favorite and maybe which one was my least favorite. So here's the games that I'm going to cover in the video. It's the Fallout 76 DLCs and patch updates. Not the full game, but mainly just the patches that came out this year and the new DLCs. The Resident Evil 2 Remake that happened in February. Elder Scrolls Online Prelude to Elsweyr. That was ZeniMax's teaser for the upcoming Elsweyr expansion. And then there's 2 new dungeons available right now too. The Devil May Cry 5, Borderlands Game of the Year Enhanced Edition, which is really just enhanced graphics. Eastshade, a new indie game by Eastshade Studios. And then Tock, A Tale for Two, which was a fun co-op puzzle adventure game that I played. Elder Scrolls Blades, but the early access version of Elder Scrolls Blades. I played Apex Legends for one day, and I streamed it once. And I also played The Division 2, but only the open beta. And lastly, I played an oldie but goodie called Inside. Well, why don't we start with Resident Evil 2, the remake. So this was my first time playing any Resident Evil game, and on top of that I played on a PC with the keyboard WASD controls and a mouse. So that's something to keep in mind. I chose Claire mainly because my audience told me to. I thought the gameplay was decent. The visual style was pretty intense. The graphics were great. And the regular battles with the zombies were very believable and caused a few jump scares. That was good. But the boss battles, they were just annoying as fuck, more than anything. So besides the boss battles, things I didn't like were the invincible Mr. X, not even knowing that he wasn't invincible. I just didn't know that much about Resident Evil games. Also the wonky, janky Japanese to English translation. It was almost painful to listen to the characters. There were even a few evil characters just for the sake of being evil with absolutely no indication why they're evil. And that's just bad character writing and bad story writing, actually. So anyway, I uninstalled it after I finished playing it. I did play all the way to the end, but I didn't replay it, and I probably won't touch any of the DLCs either. But only time will tell. Who knows? Next up, why don't we talk about Apex Legends? So that popped up totally unexpectedly by Electronic Arts, even though I actually knew it was coming out beforehand because I have friends that work at Electronic Arts, and one of them was actually working on it. And their headquarters is right here in Redwood City, which is about not even an hour bike ride from here. So anyway, about a week after it was released, I tried it once, and that was my first Battle Royale game ever. And I generally don't handle player versus player games and like multiplayer games very well, and I did really badly. And I never touched it after that one day, and I uninstalled it the next day. So what I did like about it, I liked the smooth frame rate. It definitely performed well. I like the accessibility of the map, even though it's the same map. And of course I like the graphics. And EA used the Source engine for its graphics engine, which is Valve's engine, which they use for the Left 4 Dead series, Portal, Half-Life 2. What I didn't like about it is pretty much what I just said. It's actually kind of boring to me, just player versus player constantly. You get to team up, yeah, and there's a little bit of a social aspect to it, but it's the same thing over and over. It's not even as inventive as Fortnite, because in Fortnite at least you get to build bases and build structures, and you can't even do that here in Apex Legends. Now let's talk about Fallout 76's DLCs and patches. Not the full game, because I started playing that in November, of course, but I'm talking about the DLCs that have started to roll out this year. So I know we have a love and hate relationship with Bethesda lately, and I do too. But as it turns out, some of the DLCs actually captured my attention for a little while each time. The very first one was the Nukashine Club, the DLC pack where you get to craft like a beer and spirits and hard liquor. Another DLC that came out after that was the Fastnacht Parade, which was kind of boring, but at least it was something new and unique. And there were some collectibles in there. And then after that, there was, what the hell was there? Oh yeah, there was the Sheep Squatch quest line, where you got to hunt a cryptid and figure out decipher or decrypt the mystery surrounding this cryptid. And then the one that came out most recently, which was somewhat interesting, was the Burrows, which was a sewer system underneath Harper's Ferry. And it involves a lot of legendary monsters in the sewers, along with a few good bosses. So you're able to farm some legendary loot by going through that dungeon repeatedly. And that was Fallout 76's first big DLC dungeon, so that was supposed to be somewhat exciting, but each of these DLCs are very small. So what did I like about them? Well, they add a little bit of extra spice to the wasteland, which is already gigantic. There's so many things to do in the wasteland, even though it's a really big, buggy mess. And yes, there are server disconnects. There's all the thousands of bugs that you have to deal with. There's the maintenance windows that you have to deal with lately. There's also the constant updates that change the interface, and that gets very annoying, and also new bugs pop up because of that. But all in all, it's if you already own Fallout 76, it's worth checking out each DLC and each patch as it releases, because there's small features that they're releasing in the patches as well. If you don't own Fallout 76 yet, then I still recommend waiting until it's about $20 to $25 and then grab it. But I do recommend it if you can get it that cheaply. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention that if you're interested in watching any of the streams of the games that I'm mentioning in this video, just look in the description for the links. Alright, so the next game, which I'm pretty excited to tell you about, is Eastshade by Eastshade Studios. That came out in February. This took 5 years to develop, and it was only one developer. His name is Danny Weinbaum. And he used the Unity engine, and he modified it quite a bit. It's a peaceful open-world adventure game, and the primary mechanic is actually painting landscapes and landmarks as you visit them. So it's not the biggest open world, but it's certainly worth the money. So I loved the endearing characters, and the voice acting was phenomenal for an indie game. The graphics were very good, considering that it all came from one developer, and there were very few bugs, so that's astounding. Now, a couple things I didn't love. Well, there were some performance issues, and there were some large zones in the supposed open world. They were actually unavailable until certain quests were completed. And there was an issue where you get into quest lock, which is a common problem in bigger open world games, where quests depend on others to finish and you lose track of which ones you're supposed to work on, and you can't move forward until you've completed them. But all in all, this was a fantastic game, and I really enjoyed streaming it, so I do highly recommend that you watch all of the streams again, even if you skimmed through them. The link is in the description. Alright, so why don't we talk about Elder Scrolls Online, the Prelude to Elsweyr, and the 2 new DLC dungeons that all came out in March. So the Prelude to Elsweyr is a short questline that introduces us to the upcoming expansion, which is Elsweyr, which will happen in June. So it's a good teaser for a game that has an older base core and a fairly old graphics engine that dates all the way back to 2014. This was free for about a week for anyone with just the base game, so that's a big bonus. I really liked how ZeniMax did that. It was an exciting storyline, even though it lasted only about 2.5, 3 hours. The writing was good, very good voice acting as always in The Elder Scrolls Online, and it ended on a good cliffhanger. And I liked that you didn't have to be high level to go through the prelude and the teaser to see the dragons appear for the first time. What I didn't like so much were that the other 2 DLC dungeons that they rolled out, they were way too high level for me, my level 21 character. And I just don't have time right now to grind and level up. I'd have to level up to about level 45. And the other thing is, if you don't play Elder Scrolls Online for long periods of time, you start to forget the mechanics and you forget what you're supposed to do and how to grow your character. So that's another thing that where they lose me is the stretches of time where I don't play Elder Scrolls Online, which is usually between the expansions. In March, I played a game that was recently released called Tock, A Tale for Two. And this caught me by surprise because my friend and moderator, Snuffleupagus, actually gifted me a copy of it, and we played it together. And I did say together, it's a co-op puzzle adventure game. And the developer is a Danish developer, Other Tales Interactive. And we streamed it in one session together. And when we say it's a co-op adventure, it does require 2 people and only 2 people. You can't play it alone, and you can't play with, well, you could play with more than 2 people, come to think of it. But it's an offline co-op adventure, so you don't even need to be online to play this game together, which is it's a really cool concept. So I really like the puzzles. Some were pretty difficult, but they all require 2 people, like we said. The visual aesthetic was very artistic, and it was a twilight setting somewhere in Europe, probably. And the style was almost a watercolor effect to the graphics, which I liked. It was just about the right length, too. It was 2.5 hours. The only thing that I may not be totally thrilled about is that the game isn't very deep, and it isn't really replayable, but nevertheless, it's enjoyable. And if you really wanted to, you could replay it with another player or switch the roles, because you can choose one of 2 roles in the game. So that was Tock, A Tale for Two. And then I finally got my hands on the game Inside, and that's an indie side-scrolling platformer from back in 2016. The developer was Playdead. This one is the successor to Limbo, which I think was in 2014. And it has some really compelling 3D effects, and we call them 2.5D because even though it's a side-scroller platformer, it actually takes place in a 3D environment. The visual style is just gorgeous, and it's very ominous. It's mostly monochromatic, but there's key colors in certain frames that enhance the gameplay. And the music was great. It doubled the tension through the whole game. There's a variety of gameplay mechanics, like you can control other bodies and even a submarine. The only thing maybe I didn't love is that it was rather short, but it just makes me look forward to whatever they're pumping out next, which they've already teased, and it's going to be some kind of new 3D game. Then I decided to step out of my shell again and try a multiplayer shooter the Division 2, but just the open beta. So this was my first Tom Clancy game, and I don't really do these team multiplayer first-person or third-person shooters really at all. But still, I was amazed at the graphics fidelity of the game, or at least the demo. And I really liked the stunning level of detail and just how so many unique buildings and areas were modeled. So the meshes were unique. In fact, none of the visuals looked like they were repeating or cookie cutter. And that's hard to pull off. So I did enjoy the demo, but there are serious performance issues, which apparently have been fixed in the full game. Because remember, this was just the demo. But the game was too complex, I think, for a first-timer to enjoy, and especially someone like me who doesn't really even get into these kind of games. So it didn't compel me to buy the full game, and overall it kind of felt like another serving of that typical Ubisoft user interface, that UI with different enemies and different buildings in a different setting. Alright, so I decided to spend $60 on a type of game that I never really play, Devil May Cry 5. So that was my first Devil May Cry game, and I decided to step out of my comfort zone because I don't normally do these linear action shooters or slashers. I did like the diversity of scenes as I went through part of the game, and I liked the tutorial system, though there were just too many moves and power-ups, and they were too overwhelming to choose from. So the graphics were great, and the performance was good, very good. But, I didn't even bother completing this game, and I actually uninstalled it. I just lost interest. It's not my type of game. And there were 3 characters to learn how to control, and they each had upgrades, abilities, power-ups, weapons. I was really annoyed with the camera movement too, and the enemy selection while in the camera. And because Borderlands, the original game, got a Enhanced Edition, which many people were calling Remastered, I decided to try it. Again, this is really the first time I spent more than like an hour or so in a Borderlands game, and I thought it was decent. It's an old game, and the graphics enhancements were not all that great, so I actually lost interest in it very quickly, and I uninstalled it. But that shouldn't hinder anyone else from replaying it or maybe trying it for the first time. You might actually like the Borderlands game. I do plan to play Borderlands 2. I may like that a lot more, and I'm sure I'm going to love Borderlands 3. And that's mainly the reason why I at least gave this game a shot. And last but not least, let's talk about Elder Scrolls Blades for a minute. The early access version. So I was invited to start the early access before it was available to everyone, assuming everyone whose phones could run it. And I began playing it. At first I was wondering if this was going to be a compelling game or not. As it turns out, this does kind of scratch our Elder Scrolls itch, the single player itch, while we wait for Elder Scrolls 6. The game has a lot of issues. So there's performance issues, as with any Bethesda game, because they try to do too much. They're trying to build a 2025 game on phones that we have today, and it's just too much for hardware to handle. There is a pay-to-win mechanic in the game. It's very tempting to spend real money, but don't give Bethesda any money. I haven't spent a cent, and I've enjoyed leveling up my character. In fact, you can see him in some of this footage. His name is Rondo. He's a Khajiit. He's already level 20, and it was quite a grind to level him up, but I was able to do it just through looting a bunch of gold and silver chests. I was able to wind up with some good armor and weapons. You don't have to just loot the armor and weapons. You can craft them, and then you can enchant them if you like. You can also build an alchemy lab and make potions and stuff. You can build a workshop and then improve your town. And the quest line is very long. There's tons of side quests. There's lots of jobs that you can do. So, there's lots to do in the game. So I would say that it's worth trying out. If you can get your hands on it, if your phone can handle it, definitely try it out. But like I said, don't give Bethesda any money. So what was my favorite game so far this year? from January the 1st to April the 18th, I would say it would have to be Eastshade, because it was all virtually built by one person, and because I had so much fun and it actually touched my heart and it was so compelling. The visuals were just so amazing. Even despite some of its flaws, I'd say that's my favorite game so far this year. And there it is, my 2019 recap of games that I played from January to April. I'll do this again in September, and I expect to be playing a lot of games between now and then. We know what's coming out. There's a lot coming out in May, tons of games coming out in June. There's a lot of July releases, August releases, even games that we don't even have a release date for yet. But stay tuned. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to be streaming games. I'll be uploading videos like I used to, just like this video here. Alright, so make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Click that subscribe button, and maybe click the like button too if you like the video. Alright, we'll see you very soon on a screen in your room. Thanks for watching.